Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 20th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. This meeting is being recorded for cable television. As we do, and I know these young kids in the front couple of rows do this every day at school, if everybody could stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to actually go over to that. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Board of Selectmen. I'd like to welcome some champions that we have in the audience tonight. In the spring, we honored a Little League baseball team that had won the championship. And I think it's the favorite part of the job we have here on the Board of Selectmen is to acknowledge the great work the kids do in the community. I'm happy to report that we have champions once again to my fellow board members in the town of Lynnfield and the town of Saugus. This past couple of weeks, a mite team for the Lynnfield Saugus mites, the North Shore Stars, won a championship for the Valley Hill League. It's pretty impressive. And I think it's only appropriate that on Bobby Orr's 70th birthday that we represent and we honor these young champions. I was looking today at some of the quotes from Bobby Orr, and I know Mr. Dalton, you being a big hockey fan yourself, would appreciate what he said about youth hockey. He said the biggest thing and the best thing we get out of youth hockey every time is seeing the kids smile. And I think the coaches would agree with me that these kids have not stopped smiling since I think it was early September or late August when we started the plan for the season. So I'd like to just quickly read the proclamation that we're going to present to each one of the players, and I know Coach Gromko is going to get up and speak to the wonderful accomplishment of the season. But the citation that the Board of Selectmen is going to present to each one of the players and the coaches tonight says, whereas the North Shore Stars team started the season at the Mite 4 level and ended the season playing at the Mite 2 level due to their dominant performance throughout the season. And whereas the North Shore Stars team's regular season run culminated with a season record, this is pretty impressive, of 19-2, while securing their hard-earned spot at the top of every single scoring category for the Valley Hockey League. And whereas the North Shore Stars team, of the 153 Valley Hockey League mite teams, you guys had the third highest winning percentage, the second highest goals scored with 286 goals, and I think we probably would have led that category, but I know your coaches might need to work on defense and passing at certain points throughout the season. The third best scoring percentage with 13.6 goals scored a game. And not only that, but you guys did well on defense. Each one of you played goalie, and you guys did well. You were 13th best out of the 153 teams with least goals scored. Sophie, I think you had the best performance as a goalie this year, so great job. That was one of the amazing performances by you. And whereas the North Shore Stars Mite team defeated the Winthrop Mite 2 team 10-6 to capture the Valley Hockey League Mite Championship. Now this is again impressive, scoring the most goals of any Mite team, 1 through 4, throughout the playoffs. So we therefore, as a Board of Selectmen for the town of Lynnfield, hereby offer our congratulations and those of the town for your athletic achievements and display of sportsmanship and teamwork that have made the towns of Lynnfield and the towns of Saugus very proud. Coach, if you want to come up and speak a little about the accomplishments in the season, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it is an honor to stand up here for such an amazing accomplishment, but I think, honestly, there's a lot of thank yous that are deserved, certainly from me, but also, group-wide. First of all, I'd like to thank the parents. Thank you for signing up with the Lynnfield Saugus Youth Hockey Program, and thank you for being so committed to a sport that can be kind of hard to love for a lot of reasons. Here's just a few. It's a long season, right? If I'm not mistaken, hockey covers or it touches 3 seasons of soccer. fall, winter, and spring. So it's a long season. And it's not easy to leave a warm bed, you know, when it's minus 20 degrees out and you have to be at a rink for either a practice or a game an hour before the sun rises. And thank you for offering to grab cones, milk crates, tires. There were many occasions when we were at practices setting up drills and the parents were just very eager to help us make sure that these kids got the most out of the ice time that we had. You're a special bunch of people, and without you, our program is just not possible. I'd also like to thank the Lynnfield Saugus Youth Board. Thank you for taking immediate action and responsibility to address the maintenance issues that closed Kasabuski at the very start of our season. Thank you for inviting the parents. They had a meeting. They sat in these seats right here and spoke honestly to dispel any rumors and let us know as parents and part of the stakeholders in the program, you know, the direction that they were going to head to make sure they could salvage our season. After that meeting, I remember thinking two things. One, I was so upset that someone's responsibility was to keep that rink in proper maintenance, and how communities were depending on it, and how the rink is named after two fallen soldiers, the Kasabuski brothers, John and Walter, who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. And it just seemed that somebody was comfortable, you know, not maintaining that rink. And it was hard, you know, it was hard for us to move on. But our board, on the brighter note, left me thinking how lucky we are to have people so committed. They found ice in places they called rinks. They made sure that we got ice time. So for these, you know, for this team to get to where they got when it didn't look like we were going to have a chance to practice was very amazing. I'd also like to thank our coaches, you know, myself and Sean and Mark. I think it was our first game when we all decided that our metric for success would not be wins or losses. It was how many kids could we get to return and play. And we also agreed that a 4-3 loss would be better than a 10-0 win. I find it amazing that not worrying about wins and losses ends up translating into a championship. I'd also like to thank the town officials. Being here, you know, tonight shows how much you care about these programs. You understand that these programs tighten communities. You understand that our youngsters need fields, tennis courts, basketball courts, as safe places to play, train, and develop. So these places are expensive to maintain and may appear as an easy target to balance budgets, but we only have to look down the street to Stoneham, the high school boys team that made it to the state finals, rallying around an absolute tragedy in their community. This shows how close a community becomes when a common denominator is an ice rink, or a basketball field, or a baseball field, a soccer field, or a football field. Your support of the youth programs and the facilities they use are critical, so thank you. Without you, this is not possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our players. You're quite an amazing bunch of kids. You all agreed to play goalie. Sophie, you jumped in there. I think a lot of kids were a little nervous, but you all did outstanding. Cole, and I think it helped you understand how hard that position is. There were many games where you got tripped, elbowed, hit, but you never pointed fingers at each other. You never pointed fingers at the goalie when we were down by a number of goals. You all dug deep to rally to come from behind. Your support for each other was impressive, and these qualities will serve you well in life. Your spirit are the reason that the adults in this room and beyond do this. We love to see the excitement for practices and the games that you play on, and as Mr. Chairman mentioned, we love to see those sweaty, smiling faces. You make the parents, the community proud. So let's give each other a round of applause for this accomplishment. So in no particular order, I'm going to call out your name and come on up and grab your citation. Cole Alexander. Thank you. Can we shake your hand? Massimo Ferrullo. Michael Barrett. Dominic Magliozzi. Nice job, buddy. Maxwell, Gromko. I know, huh? Emerson, Keefe. And Sophie Morgis. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. And Mark and Sean, Mark Magliozzi.
Take a picture with all the citations in the Board of Selectmen.
Sure. Nice job, Coach.
You guys want to get a picture?
Yeah.
Get a picture.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Be in front of the table.
Yeah, we'll start right here. Yeah, take a picture. Then we get to have.
Pass it to cameras. Do you move your face? You'll get it locked. The other one behind you. Here you go. You get paid by the flash. Yes.
This is like what it's like to get.
5, 6 more, Dan, come on.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
For the town hall too.
Let's do it, display it.
So I'll get back to my.
Thank you so much, yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Display it proudly right there.
We'll keep building up. We're gonna make them add on to town hall.
You guys are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It's very captivating. I know the kids will thoroughly enjoy it. Thank you. And my son's the first one to leave quick. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Good job. Thank you. Good job. Now we're going to move on to road paving program for 2018. Great follow-up to the championship run by the North Shore Stars. We've got Public Works Director John Tomez here. John, do you want to come up to the microphone with Charlie? Charlie, you want to come up and speak to that? And discuss the road paving program for this year. Charlie, how's it going tonight?
Good. Good evening, Board. I'm here to present the road resurfacing program for 2018. This process starts about a year in advance as we look at utility work that needs to be done on various roads. We scope out the work that needs to be done in the upcoming year and prepare the list of stuff that needs to be done on these roads, including coordinating with utilities and repair of drainage. I'll go over the list of streets that we're proposing to resurface in 2018. That starts with Lowell Street. There's 2 sections of Lowell Street that we haven't done in the last few years between North Reading and Main Street, including the section between Chestnut Street and North Hill Drive, and between Goldenrod and 348 Lowell Street. And once we complete this year, that should be complete that section of road. Unfortunately, there was quite a bit of work that needed to be done on that, so it took several years for us to complete the work. We're also proposing to do Crest Road, the entire length of Crest Road, Prospect Ave, Crescent Ave, Highland Ave, Pleasant Ave. And then as a continuation from last year, we're proposing to do Longbow Circle and Abbey Lane. Those 2 streets were left off the the work from last season because of extensive drainage work that we had to complete. Like I said, we are scoping out streets to be done in advance, so as we look forward, there's several streets that we're looking at to do in 2019 and 2020, including Phillips Road, Glen Drive, Kings Road, Shady Nook, Beaver Ave, Hutchins Circle, Grayland Road, Wildwood Drive, which the section from Pillings Pond Road to Driftwood Lane, and Lindbergh Road.
Charlie, can I just quickly, how many of these roads that we're going to do this year are on that list from last year of, are in the pipeline?
Let's see, Crest Road, Prospect Ave, Crescent Ave, Highland Ave, all these streets were on, I'll double check, but
So this is pretty much of a longer-term plan that we have at DPW of repairing these roads, if not doing them completely over. And it's a multi-year effort.
correct. It includes, like I said, coordination with the utility companies. So
Yeah.
we talked to National Grid, and as people over on Glen Drive and Lindbergh Road will see this year, the gas will be relayed on those streets in anticipation of those streets being resurfaced, hopefully next year.
Okay. Any questions, comments from my fellow board members?
Charlie, maybe for the benefit of the public, everyone's always interested in getting their street done, and maybe just comment on the selection process, how you decide on the particular roads, because I think that's important for.
Oh, most definitely. That is a popular question to ask as we go through the season here. Back in 2016, a company called Beta did a road survey, a report on the road conditions for every street in town, and they've ranked every street starting from worst to the best. We take a look at the top 20, top 30 streets, and we take a look at those every year and determine which one has moved to the top of the list. So between that and coordination with utility work, we make our determination of what streets need to be done.
So, I know the answer, but just for the benefit of the public again. So a road could be listed number 5, but deferred because of utility work, correct?
Deferred to by utility work, or that maybe other streets have deteriorated to the point so that they move up the list in front of that number 5.
Charlie, thank you for the update here. You're doing 9 roads next year. Is that still, you still comfortable with that amount of roads per year? Do you think that's about the maximum you can do in a construction year?
Yeah, I mean, and then that's a good question. You know, this is something, it becomes tougher and tougher every year. I'd like to see more streets done. Once we add more work, though, it becomes sometimes it becomes a different animal, as far as management, as far as how much work can actually be done.
Right.
So there's a fine line between that. I think in the future, we could look at other projects that are more extensive, say, longer stretches of roadway that need to be done, that could be done in a season, in addition to the streets that we've listed out. So maybe it's something we will take a look at in the future, on this year, to see if there's a need for additional funds, maybe to move it along.
Right, yeah, because in the past, it's been sort of a test point to see how many roads you can do in a season if you have the funding. That's when we increased the funding for the road work, what we thought might be a maximum amount that you're able to do within a season with the crews that we have. You know, so now we've gone through a couple of seasons. You've done one season now with the new DVW director. You know, if you can do 10, 11, 12 roads, you know, please let us know that in the next year or two, and so we can possibly crank this up a little bit if we need to, because as you know, our 40-year road project is now 110 years, so we're trying to speed that up as much as we can.
Most definitely. I will inform the board if I think we can up the number of streets to be done.
Excellent, thank you, appreciate it.
Charlie, thank you. I appreciate it. Any further comments? Thank you. Job well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
We're going to move on to item number 4, dock license applications at 0 and 30 Maywood Road. Antonio Cedillo of 30 Maywood Road is here. Antonio, if you want to come up here, if my fellow board members have any questions, concerns regarding this two dock license applications. We have received the payment of $5 that we were waiting for, so we finally received, we got it. So
I
think
hope
we're
that
all
goes
set.
to the roads.
Yeah, so I think it's. So we,
Cash payment?
it was, did the check clear?
One was cash, one was a check.
I have to correct you, it was
Submitted
actually
$10.
$10 because he's applying for two
All right,
docks.
so I
So it's
think
a
we-
$5 lifetime license for the dock, which is the biggest bargains you can get from the town of Lynnfield.
That's a change
Thank you,
of,
Bob.
that's a big change. You want to wait till next meeting to decide on this? Do I have a motion?
Sure. I'll move the board approve the dock licenses for 0 Maywood Road and 30 Maywood Road.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Antonio, thank you so much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much. All right.
We're gonna move on to item 5, Marianne Supino. I don't think she's here tonight. Requested the placement of a bench on Town Common in honor of her father, John. We have requested the DPW find a suitable location for this location, possibly by the gazebo near the War Memorial. It's in honor of his service. He was a veteran. I have no problem with this. I know she's eager to get this done. I don't know if I have any motion on this.
Just before the motion, is there a policy with respect to requests such as this?
There's no formal policy, I believe, but they do have to pay for the bench itself. The DPW does the installation. They provide the money for the bench and the plaque. And the DPW has the vendor that they use, so it fits with the other benches. And the placement of the bench, we ask for their opinion, but it's subject to approval by the DPW because, as you know, we have plans in that area for the gazebo, and we want to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the other things we're doing.
All right, thank you, Bob.
And this is similar to what we've done by Pillman's Pond and on the Common prior.
That's right. Those are the two locations we've
Okay.
used.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll move the board approve placement of the memorial bench on the common, subject to payment of the associated cost by the sponsor and any conditions that may be imposed by the Department of Public Works.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 6. As I had mentioned before prior that we had a discussion during the budget proposal of the school committee and the superintendent that there's a challenge right now with space issues at Summer Street, possibly at Huckleberry, and with several developments coming into the town of Lynnfield possibly. So I thought it would be best if we put together a space committee, enrollment committee, and a capacity committee to look at the space issues that we might be having, especially at the elementary schools. We've had, which I'm not surprised, as I said many times, that we've had a number of volunteers who are willing to serve and help out the town of Lynnfield, and I think we might have upwards of 10 to 15 people interested in this committee. So we split it up over several different meetings, and tonight's the first meeting. We're going to have a discussion with some of those candidates. We put out, I think, the next 3 dates, Bob, of possible people coming before us.
We have some scheduled for tonight and some scheduled for the first meeting in April, which I believe is April 10th, Tuesday, April 10th.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience who's here tonight for the Space Committee? If you want to come up to the microphone and state your name and your address, please.
Gentleman, I'm Gordon Forrest, 6 Mitchell Road.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. If you could just tell us a little about yourself and what makes you a good fit for this important committee for the town of Lynnfield.
Sure. I think so. My interest is really from twofold. One, I think most of you know I've been very involved in as a volunteer here in town, mostly as a scout leader and youth sports coach. As my boys have gone off to college, I find myself with a little bit extra time that I'd be happy to provide some additional service to the town. But I think secondly, and perhaps most importantly, is professionally, I work in management consulting, and I help organizations every day to evaluate data and to evaluate how to move forward with strategies and process improvement, given limited resources and often under very short time frames. So I think that's quite frankly that's an area of expertise that can lend itself specifically to this particular town committee. I don't come in with any preconceived notions that we need additional facilities or anything. I think we should let the data speak for itself, and then we can bring that data and recommendations back to back to the school committee, back to the Board of Selectmen, back to town meeting, whatever the case may be, to move forward.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments from my fellow board members?
No comments from me.
Phil?
Gordon, thank you. I certainly, I'm certainly partial to your resume because you are a graduate of UMass Amherst, and I'm an alumni also, so thank you. You know, I appreciate all the work.
We won't hold it against
Yeah. They're just jealous. And
I am also a UMass Amherst MBA. Phil, what are you?
Beautiful. I have something less than that. So go ahead and thank you, and I want to thank you for all the work you did with the Boy Scouts too.
Thanks,
You did a
Bill.
wonderful
Yeah, you
job
do a
with
great
that.
job with that,
You
Gordon.
know,
Thank you.
You know, we have you know, a good group of people that are coming forward for this, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. So thank you for
Great.
your name, and thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Gordon.
Thanks.
And the committee, again, I didn't say this earlier, but it's 2 parents and 1 community member that we have slated for that committee right now. So thank you. Anybody else? I know you want to come up to the microphone, state your name and your address, please.
Good evening. My name's Joe Adubato, and I live at 746 Summer Street.
Thank you, Joe. If you could, like Gordon, before you speak a little about your resume and what makes you a good fit for this committee.
Sure. So first I have wanted to get involved with the town in some capacity at some point, and I think this is a great way to get involved in the town. I've coached youth soccer here in town, and I've served with Mr. Bemis on the Huckleberry Hill Parent Council for the past 2 years. So I feel like I have a vested interest in the schools. I have a brother in town that has 3 sons, and I have 3 daughters. He's at Summer Street, we're at Huckleberry. So, and they span from grades actually 2 years old all the way to 7th grade. And currently, I work at Burlington High School. I'm the director of guidance there. So I do a lot with public education on a daily basis, and I'm dealing with enrollment quite a bit in my own school, where we manage student population quite a bit. And I think I can add to that sense, again, no preconceived notions with anything that needs to be done. It would just be simply working with the committee, looking at numbers, coming up with a plan that would be best for the town, best for the kids.
So thank you. I appreciate your desire to serve on the committee. Do I have any comments or questions from my fellow board members?
None for me.
No, Joe, just thank you for putting your name in and coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
You too. Do we have any other individuals? Please come right up to the microphone. State your name, address, and if you could speak a little to your resume and what makes you a good fit for this committee, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure,
Thank you.
Andrew Pacello, 3 Ashley Court. Do you have my resume? Or I brought copies of.
Wait, do I have it from
Okay,
me?
all right.
We do.
So I've been in the town about 2.5 years now, and I guess my primary interest is, I sort of believe strongly whenever you benefit from a community that you sort of have an obligation to contribute back. So really just an interest in serving. And I've been looking at sort of what, committees exist within the town and what might be the right fit, and this one resonated largely because of my experience. I've been working at Massachusetts General Hospital for 17, 18 years now. And, among many things that we do is periodically look at patient volume, sort of projections for, sort of current volume projections for, future capacity, and then looking at, current space, and, where we might need to make adjustments. And I think that sort of translates very, cleanly to what this committee would be doing. I have 2 children. They're young. They're not in the school system yet, but recognize that this type of effort is one that's going to probably take many years to sort of get to a final endpoint, and that it's sort of the children, who are going to be in the system several years from now, who are really going to be, kind of the beneficiary of whatever decisions are made. I guess I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Thank you for the information. Do you have any comments?
No comments from me.
No, just, Andrea, thank you for coming forward. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you. Do we have any other individuals or people from the community interested? Come to the microphone, state your name, your address, and a little about yourself, your resume, and what makes you a good fit for this committee. Thank you.
Hi. Nancy McManus on Pine Hill Road. And so from a personal background, why I want to be in this committee is my daughter is in the kindergarten class of 2030. That is the sort of bubble that seems to be starting to move through the school system. And I have another daughter who's 3 years old. So sort of whatever decisions we start making right now, depending on the enrollment for her class, will also kind of impact her kindergarten all the way through. From a professional background, I work in financial services at Fidelity Investments, and I'm in the product education division. So I look at a lot of new hire classes, correct ratios for student-teacher ratio for all the way from new hire right out of college through VP level. And we just find it's really important, even at that level, for small class sizes and the right touch points. And I think with kindergarten all the way through these lower elementary school, that's even more important. So just to kind of bring a different perspective from the finance business side, but also the education within a financial services industry, and then bring my own personal conviction to that. So any questions, happy to answer them.
Well, Nancy, that just made me feel old. Class of 2030.
Yeah.
Wow, that's... well, I want to thank you for your desire to serve on this committee. Do I have any comments or questions from my fellow board members?
No comments.
Nancy, thank you for coming forward. I did see that you were being proactive on this very issue back in February, so I'm sure you're happy to see this moving forward.
Yeah, I am, and the timeliness of getting us off the ground.
And thank you for coming forward and doing this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'll have copies.
Thank you, Nancy. Yep, thank you. Do I have anybody else here who has put their resume or desire, intent to serve on the committee? Okay, as you can see, we have outstanding individuals who want to serve on this committee. It's a good problem Lynnfield has with so many wonderful people stepping forward, so thank you so much for taking the time out tonight to come before the Board of Selectmen. As I said, it'll be over the next couple of meetings. I think there was an event tonight in Summer Street School. Pastapalooza that we regrettably we couldn't go to, but I think a lot of the people are there tonight. So seeing that there's nobody else here to interview for that committee, we're going to move on to the Town Meeting Study Committee. I see Chairman Jack Adelson, I think I see 2 committee members with him, 3 or 4. So I don't know, Jack, if you want to come up and speak for the committee. You guys have done great work thus far, so I want to thank you for that.
I guess you'll have to be the judge of that.
You guys always do great work. Chairman Adelson, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a progress report tonight. I'd first like to mention the names of everybody on the committee. Lori Perino, who is sadly going to be leaving us pretty soon for Denmark. Her family has a business opportunity there. It sounds like a great adventure. Malka Eliza Travellini, Jill Giuliano, Gary Hathaway, Richard Rigatano, and Bob McKendrick. And of course, Trudy and Arthur Burke have also liaisoned with us. So, I don't have a slideshow for you. I didn't have time, I'm sorry. It's a busy time of year, but we did produce the report. I just want to quickly state our mission to start. It was to research and recommend ways to make town meeting more efficient and productive, with the ultimate goal of encouraging more residents to attend. So here's a recap of what we've basically been doing. We in groups attended 4 different town meetings: Wayland, Ipswich, Rockport, and North Reading, to observe how they run their meetings. Arthur Burke provided us with a gigantic 3-ring binder, chock full of information from other towns through the Moderators Association that he belongs to. So we spent a lot of time studying that. We got a town meeting times book that we haven't probably looked at. We haven't gotten into it, but as you may know, that's an alternate way of running town meetings besides Robert's Rules of Order. There's something called town meeting times. That's what, right? And it was devised by a group of moderators in Massachusetts, I believe, who felt that Robert's rules weren't a good way to run, or that it was a better way to run town meeting than Robert's Rules of Order. Some towns use it, some don't. We didn't even consider that. Most importantly, we produced, distributed, and evaluated a townwide survey in order to get input from our residents. So to get into that, first we had to decide whether we're going to do an online one, which would have been much, much easier, like a monkey survey, or a paper survey, because we were very lucky on our timing. Trudy was getting ready to send out all her census forms, and we had the opportunity to have a piece of paper inserted into every one of those 4,500-ish envelopes. So we chose to go that way, thinking we'd probably get back 300 or 400. And the good news is we got back almost 1,300. The bad news is we got stuck with 1,300 double-sided pieces of paper we had to tabulate and sort. So we started out one way, which really didn't work too well. And then Trudy and her husband Dave came to the rescue. Dave produced a very sophisticated Excel spreadsheet, which allowed us to tabulate. Well, we had to put 1,300 rows in there, but once we got all the data in, he was able to sort it and manipulate it to produce this report. This report actually came from Dave. I'll get into that at the end. But because the survey took so long to finish and tabulate, all of a sudden it was March, and we really had a chance to perform due diligence. So we feel we really, other than the electronic voting and check-in, which we feel comfortable recommending, we're not making any other recommendations for this town meeting. We need more time. We think we've got a great foundation with this survey and the report to statistically analyze what towns do what, reach out to towns, see how these various things are working. So I guess, in my opinion at least, and I think the committee agrees, we'd like to defer anything else until October in terms of a specific recommendation other than the electronic voting and check-in. I will tell you some of the things we observed. These are not recommendations, but things we found interesting that other towns have implemented. A quorum reduction after the start of the meeting. Provision of childcare services. No new article to be started after 10:30 or whatever time they designate without a vote of the meeting attendees. Limits on speaking times for presentation and those speaking for or against an article. A number of towns have implemented that. The Wayland, for instance, has 7-minute limit on presentations and a 2-minute limit on anybody speaking for or against an article. And there were a number of other towns with similar procedures. No reconsideration unless new information is provided. A video screen showing the article or summary thereof, as well as the recommendation and vote of each committee involved. That was, where did we see that? Was that Ipswich? Yeah, it was pretty convenient. Finally, in terms of the survey, I'm not going to walk through every page of it, but you can look at it yourself. But first of all, we'd like, if you don't mind, to post it on the website so everybody can look at it.
Absolutely.
The biggest takeaways from that survey are overwhelmingly people want check-in voting times and time limits on presentations and questions and comments. They also want earlier times and earlier start times and earlier finish times. The most overwhelming vote on the whole survey was no change in the quorum. The two biggest factors that prevent people from attending town meeting are work and length of the meeting. As a corollary to that, the two primary changes that would make people attend town meeting are electronic voting and shorter meetings. Most people hear about the town meeting by way of the newspaper. And there's other questions that are in there that we broke it down by 4 categories. Everybody had to check off whether they always attend, sometimes attend, rarely attend, or never attend. So that survey is broken down by those 4 categories and then totaled. I can't thank Trudy enough, because I honestly, we're all so busy. She took it upon herself, and her husband Dave, to do so much of the grunt work. She tabulated probably the majority of these surveys, and he produced that spreadsheet and report for us. You're very lucky to have her. Also, I would just want to say that we had 3 younger people versus myself on the committee, and I can't stress enough how important that is, the perspective that we got, things that I was skeptical about that were explained to me from another person's perspective. It does no good to have 7 guys or 7 people from the same generation on a committee like that. There's no benefit to that. So just going forward, I think that's a great thing if you can get people to volunteer. Great thing. And I guess that's pretty much it as far as what we have to say.
Well, Jack, I have to agree that I think it is a great committee. Certainly represents as a generational, where we split that committee up, who we appointed to it. And I can just see, just from the work on this survey, so it's about 1,300 individuals.
1,289 to be exact.
So that's probably.
That was a 27% response rate on the of the people that got the census. 27%.
I'm comfortable to say that's probably anybody who goes to town meeting would go. I mean, we have the big issues that get about over 1,000 people to town meeting.
We had a lot of people respond who checked off they never go.
Yeah.
Not sure how you evaluate that data, but they responded and we recorded it. Yeah.
Well, I'm most impressed with what you've accomplished as a committee already, with the recommendations that you've made to town meeting. We've seen the positive changes at town meeting already because of the committee, so I want to thank you and your committee and the members for that. I mean, I'm fine with deferring any more recommendations until October. There's a lot of information here
Yeah, I think
for us to consider put online.
It's a good foundation, but
Yeah.
the last thing I want to do is make a recommendation and have somebody say to me, well, how many other towns do that? And then not be able to answer the question. So.
Questions or comments from my fellow board members?
No, just my compliments to you, Jack, and to the committee as a whole. I mean, I think this is a great work product, and it's a great start to have data driving our decisions and how we go about improving town meetings. So, thank you for your team.
And I'm convinced if we had done the online survey, it would have been a fraction of that.
Yeah, great.
So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Jack, just to echo their sentiments, thank you for doing this, and don't sell yourself short. You're very young at heart. So,
Yeah,
but I want to thank Trudy and her husband for all the work they did in this. I know they did a tremendous amount of manipulation of this and getting this product out, and that saved you and a lot of the members a
You're
lot
not supposed to
of
mention
other work.
manipulation with
I
something.
know.
It's not a-
Manipulation doesn't sound good.
Must be that UMass Amherst education.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, no, Trudy, but thank your husband. I really appreciate that for the service.
You didn't hire me for my math skills.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the committee for all the hard work. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to the proposed FY 2019 operating and capital budget and spending plan. Town Administrator Rob, you hit the ground running. The minute you were appointed, we threw you right into the budget process. I know you have a lot of experience with that, so I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and feedback regarding the Town of Lynnfield's budget proposal.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present my first town budget for the town of Lynnfield, and it has been a process that has allowed me to really admire some of the department heads and the staff in the town of Lynnfield. It is beyond any expectation regarding the quality of the workforce and the dedication of the people that I work with. So I think as my first budget presentation, Bob, if we want to put that up, I'd like to speak a little bit about the principles of budgeting that I've brought since I began in some of my previous employment opportunities, most particularly in the city of Melrose. Most people ask, how do you put together a budget? And it's really no different in the public sector, the non-for-profit, or the private sector. You have to begin with some principles of budgeting, and mine have remained consistent. And I hope to continue to bring them to the town of Lynnfield. One is to assemble the best management team. The town of Lynnfield has accomplished that, particularly with Julie and Bob as part of the budget team. The second is pretty simple, but it's important to manage costs, debt, and stay ahead of potential crises. The wiggle room in a community is far different than in the public, private, or non-for-profit sector. The third is to create a vibrant budget team that challenges each other and at times needs to challenge the town. And I think we do have that. I have always worked as a part of a team in which I guess I'm the captain of or the coach of, but we have an excellent team in Town Hall. The fourth is to create a budget that speaks to a community's core values and choices. Now that's particularly important because I envision a budget not just a group of numbers to get you through the year, but it's a group of numbers that tell a story. Tell a story of what the town believes in and what they want to invest in. It's the most important document that we produce every year. And it affects every household in the town and every man, woman, and child, regardless of age. Fifth is to promote a budget that public education is at the forefront. And I've always believed that in coming to Lynnfield, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time and direction. This community, to its great credit, puts public education at the forefront in a responsible way. Next is to continue to invest in the maintenance and enhancement of our town's infrastructure and technology. This town has made an incredible investment over the last 2 decades in our schools and our playing fields, historic properties, and in our collective environmental greenbelt. And it's important to maintain and enhance that infrastructure and maintain technology to be able to run our business or our community more efficiently. Create a vibrant economic climate that attracts and supports a wide diversity of businesses here at Market Street and throughout the community, but as important, cultural, historical, and recreational opportunities for all citizens and age groups. The next is to promote a balanced and responsible suburban design and planning to protect our town's environmental treasures and our quality of life. And most importantly, and I think we see this at every selectman meeting that I've attended, to promote and involve an active citizenry, which this town absolutely has, that works in partnership with a responsive government to manage the town of Lynnfield in a thoughtful, honest, and accountable manner. So that's how we begin the process of creating the budget. Then you break it down in terms of what are your specific budget goals this year. So we set out 6. One is to develop a sustainable, balanced budget. What I mean by that is obviously by law we must have a balanced budget. It's the only level of government in which you must have a balanced budget. And that balanced budget is approved not only by this Board of Selectmen and town meeting, but also by independent auditors and Department of Revenue. You cannot set your tax rate unless you truly have a balanced budget. They cannot say that in the Commonwealth. They certainly cannot say that in the federal government. You do not use non-recurring revenue to balance the operating budget. I need the people of Lynnfield to know how unique this town has been to be able to accomplish that every year since the economic crash in 2008 and in the downturn of local aid, particularly in a town that's 80% residential with a limited commercial base. A great achievement by Julie and each member of the Board of Selectmen. Maintain an aggressive capital program. This budget accomplishes that, in my opinion. Continue to build reserves for economic downturns. Continue to fund the OPEB liability. And again, a budget that reflects the priorities of the community, which I also believe this budget accomplishes. So, as we build the budget, the first thing we talk about is revenue. The 4 ways in which municipalities develop revenue is through the property tax, state aid, local receipts, and enterprise funds. So what are the very positive aspects of revenue in the town of Lynnfield? One, we have excellent collection rates, and we have strong, consistent home values, which allow us to plan budgets in the short term and the long term. The second is the Commonwealth's revenues remain strong after a very slow first quarter in which the governor had to consider 9 C cuts. We have to be very conservative with state revenues because in my tenure as both mayor of Melrose, and I begin here, we have seen 9 C cuts in at least 6 of the last 10 years. Revenues oftentimes are overestimated at the state level, and the governor remains committed, and this is to his credit, to tying increases in local aid to state economic growth, which is a testament to the Commonwealth's efforts. Third, Lynnfield is meeting and exceeding local receipts with conservative estimates. One of the worst things a community can do is to overestimate estimates, to maybe invest a little bit more in something, or to avoid difficult choices. But this community has not done that, and by creating conservative budgetary revenue estimates, we're able to balance the budget and have reserves and make specific investments in capital and technology. One, meeting enterprise fund revenue expectations, which we have done, but more importantly, as we look into the next year, one, through the change in ambulance management in terms of billing, and taking a look at golf receipts, that we can take a good look at examining both efficiencies and collection to not only meet revenue expectations on our enterprise funds, but to exceed them, to capture all direct and indirect costs that are critical to the health of an enterprise fund. The next are property taxes. The increase in the property tax, we increased to the statutory limits of Proposition 2.5, which is $1,029,574, with new growth estimates at $325,000 for FY19 compared to FY18 actual of $435,774. This is a key piece of information that I know the board is aware of, but the taxpayers of Lynnfield should be aware of, that although we have seen substantial growth, particularly where we are today, that we are now entering a new phase of expectation for new growth that is, in the frame of pre-Market Street new growth. Now, the only way outside taxation towns can generate revenue is through new growth and also through local receipts, and we are seeing a withdrawal of the new growth numbers. Now, what are the positive things we can look at in terms of new growth? One, Market Street continues to grow with a new phase currently being built. There's obviously in the next month going to be an option to somewhat reverse this trend, although not immediate, with a community discussion, debate, and vote on new development proposals that are before the town. But it should be noted that if these proposals are accepted, the actual when seeing of new growth numbers is oftentimes 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So as we look out in the budget process, we need to be cognizant of the fact that this right now is the new norm in terms of our tax levy, conservative new growth, which is declining, not increasing, and a stabilization, but a modest increase in local aid and local receipts. Property tax by class, obviously we see here that the split is fairly steady, with residential taxes making up more than 80% of the total levy. So we are a community heavily reliant on the property tax to fund our operating expenses. The next slide is a very clear vision of where new growth is in the community. As you see here, Market Street, the boom at Market Street happened. We saw growth before, small growth before and after. But although Market Street continues to benefit this community in so many ways, as it pertains to meals tax, as it pertains to value, as it pertains to the amount of money this facility brings in every year, and has allowed the town of Lynnfield to grow and to invest and to focus credible investment in public schools, we are seeing the clear trend that new growth is no longer available to us. And although we remain steady and strong, this is a new time, a time in which dollars, as they always have been, but particularly need to be looked at 3 and 4 times. New positions need to be looked at 3 and 4 times. Contracts need to be looked at as we look at our collective bargaining units, as well as particular investments in terms of understanding that this is the new norm. And this is the new norm because, as I said before, we are reliant on the property tax as a town. We are looking at declining new growth figures, and obviously the new reality of state aid. Although every year state aid is increasing across the Commonwealth, communities like Lynnfield, as minimum aid communities, in many ways suffer. And what do I mean by that? We are looking at approximately $68,000 in new aid for the entire town and the entire public schools. Put that in perspective, that probably covers the salary for one public school teacher. That's for the entire town. We are looking at new local aid numbers that put us behind the numbers of 2009. If you look at health insurance, pensions, the cost of doing business, investment in our public education, and as you know, our roads and infrastructure and our public safety, that's far more than this amount of money. So that is also a new reality, and that is not to be dour. That's simply to state as we move forward, those are the new realities that we have to deal with and we have to manage accordingly. Local receipts. Local receipts are fees, licenses, permits, rentals, motor vehicle excise tax, and obviously dock rentals, or dock fees, which are an incredible game changer for us tonight. Right. So what we are seeing in terms of the positive are our meals taxes. Obviously, people are still, regardless of this, the economy, are going out to eat, which benefits this community. And motor vehicle excise tax makes up more than 50% of local receipts and estimates. People are still continue to invest in vehicles. So as we look at local receipts from FY18 to FY19, we have continued conservative estimates. We are seeing a steadying of local receipts, which is great. Obviously, you want to see things increase, but as long as we can consistently budget based on solid revenues that don't necessarily fluctuate in radical ways, we're able to budget. And what we're seeing here is a stabilization of local receipts and in some cases a small increase. And we are obviously looking at, as we look at new growth improves local receipts, more cars in terms of excise taxes. Here, maybe some more restaurants, more fees and spending. Those are things that we can look at as not only ways to look at new growth, but also as a ways to increase revenue. So I think this next slide is something that the town should be very proud of. We look at other funds which are free cash stabilization and capital facilities stabilization. Free cash is neither free or cash, yet they call it that. A free cash number is like almost the equivalent of a community's tax return. We look at our estimated revenues. We budget conservatively a revenue number based upon those estimates, and once the Department of Revenue comes in, certifies our tax rate, that underestimating of conservative estimates of receipts, we receive in free cash. And that is truly the sign when Standard & Poor's looks at our bond rating, which we have held firm, is one of the first things, the liquidity of a community is judged in many cases by their free cash, their stabilization fund, and their investment in capital. So if you look at this stewardship of the town that this board should be very, very proud of, we have seen continuous increases in both of these when I'm sure the temptation was to spend and spend. Stabilization fund in 2014 was a little less than $1 million, $982,225. And in 2018 and going into 19, it's over 1.7 million. That's a 76% increase in this community stabilization fund. And no one predicted what happened in 1991 with the crash. No one predicted what happened in 2001 and 2002 after 9/11. And no one predicted what happened in 2008 with the crash of the not only national but worldwide economy. So this town, not to be overly dramatic, is preparing itself for the inevitable flows of the economy in a way that is prudent and very aggressive. The Capital Facility Stabilization Fund, again, $580,244 in 2014, over $1.3 million in 2018. That's an increase of 128%. An incredible job. That allows this community to take care of its investments, to plan ahead, to have a good purchasing flow of equipment for John can have in the DPW. We're not letting all our trucks break down. How I explain it to the public is you have 2 cars in your house. You don't want both of their transmissions to go. You in your own home, you purchase a new car, then you wait for that to be paid off. You may purchase another new car after that. And that is the same way a town is operating. And the Capital Stabilization Fund allows you to do that rather than always falling behind, which always costs more. 2019 revenues, we are projecting tax revenue increase of 1.3 million. We're projecting an increase of local receipts of 100,000. We're projecting an increase in state aid of 1.25%, which I said before is less than 70,000 in total new state aid for the community. Some things to look out for that concern me, and why I think this budget is a very conservative, modest budget in preparation for some uncertain times to allow us to remain strong. One, the federal government is slowly and absolutely withdrawing direct aid to communities, yet regulations remain totally unchanged. Now, the chairman knows, working in public education, that public education is hurt the worst by this, particularly in areas of Title I, early intervention, free and reduced lunch programs, and direct grant opportunities and programs for communities. So again, this aid is being taken away, while at the same point the regulations that we're held accountable for remain, and that's a challenge. Secondly, the state is making real investment in education. There's no doubt about that. However, the challenge of our town going forward, and we're learning about this and studying it, particularly with the Space Committee, is that we are a minimal aid community, which means that we're getting less than $30 per every new student that comes to the town of Lynnfield, which really covers nothing. So that is a particular challenge. I know in the State House they are working on that. But if our main challenge is increased enrollment, we cannot look to the state for help. Third, 2% in new local aid is now the benchmark. And we're not meeting that benchmark this year, but I don't think we can count on anything more than 2%. And that particularly puts a tremendous amount of strain on the property tax and public education. Another are the 2 ballot questions that may further impact on local aid. One is what's known as the millionaire's tax, and the second is the ballot question regarding the sales tax. Both of those mid-year could have a dramatic effect on where the state's revenues are going, positively or negatively, however you look at the issue. And we need to prepare for that. Therefore, I submit a very modest budget that prepares for that instability. And local aid, as I said before, remains under the 2009 levels. Okay, so 2019 expenditures. We are predicting a 5% increase in health insurance. That's an additional $246,000. That not only includes the general increases, but also as the year goes on, individuals shift from individual plans to family plans because of babies or situations. Second is the school department increase of 4.5%, which is a historic investment in the Lynnfield Public Schools, deserving, and it has been made clear to me that schools are a priority of the Board of Selectmen in this community. An increase of the North Shore Tech High School assessment, which is an excellent school with children that are looking for something different than the public schools. And of course, another one of the great challenges of municipal government in all budgets is the increase in pension costs of 9.7%. Now, what is the town doing to try to mitigate some of these increases? One, the community made the proper decision by joining the GIC. 5% is a solid increase. However, before the GIC, those increases were astronomical, and the one thing that linked big business, small business, government, and non-for-profit, by pooling many communities along with the state, it allows us to manage health insurance better. Pension assessments, the regionalized approach that this town takes with the Essex County retirement system is the right approach. Some communities have their own retirement boards without the expertise that this retirement system provides. Again, pooling resources and investments to meet our pension liability, which this town is before the date that is required by law. The next is school enrollment. Now, that's a challenge, but I think what it says more than anything else is that Lynnfield's a great place to live, and people want to raise their kids here, and they want to have their kids go to school here, and they want to live here as a family and thrive. The fourth driver of the FY19 budget is special education. However, there is positive news in that the reduction of out-of-district placements by the public schools is a testament to good management, and I think there's some hope there. So these are four drivers, which I would say are very similar to every other community in the Commonwealth, but I think the town is taking proactive steps to mitigate, not quite solve them. So the highlights of the FY19 budget include, once again, a really historic investment in the public schools. It should be noted that there are no full-time new positions in this town's budget. That means the managers of the town of Lynnfield are going to have to manage harder, do more with less, and I know they are capable of doing that. The next is a very conservative overall budget increase of 3.45%. And to put that in perspective, when you're looking at those pension costs going up 9%, when you're looking at health insurance going up 5%, when you're looking at a school investment of 4.5%, to bring this budget in at under 3.5% shows that we are collectively as managers really doing as much as we can with the money allotted to us by the taxpayers of Lynnfield, and I'm proud of them, and I know we'll be successful. So, some of the capital budget highlights include an aggressive spending plan of a little over $1.7 million. $250,000 in school technology. We talked about tonight $500,000 in great road programs done in a manner that judges roads by what should be done first based on how poor condition they're in. Electronic voting and check-in, we talked about that tonight, $70,000. Town technology, $150,000. Some equipment for the fire department, $111,000. That's Bob, what is that called?
Self-contained breathing apparatus.
Right, for going into buildings. That's an important investment to allow our fire department to be safe. The fire department roof, $50,000, a 30-passenger bus. Police cruiser, a Ford Explorer, again, reinvesting in vehicles that are going 24 hours a day. And a number of small items, but this budget in little ways but important ways helps our public safety officers do their job in a safer manner. The next slide. So in closing, Bob, we have one more slide to go. We are requesting recommending $100,000 additionally to the stabilization fund, $100,000 to the capital facilities maintenance fund, and $300,000 appropriation to OPEB. In previous years, we had done $200,000 in the stabilization fund. However, we want to meet the goals of the public schools in terms of that 4.5% and felt we were capable of lowering that by $100,000 because the current stabilization fund balance is $1,728,584, or 3.15% of the total operating budget. The policy that has been set by the town is to get your stabilization fund between 3 and 5% of the operating budget, and we have reached that. The additional $100,000 would bring us to 3.33% within the policy guidelines, but in the low end of that policy guidelines, and we must be cognizant of that. The Capital Facilities Maintenance Stabilization Fund has a balance of also a little over $1.3 million, or 2.4%, and that policy is 1 to 3%, an additional $100,000 to bring it to 2.59%, getting us towards the high end of the policy. So next year we might look at reducing that number, perhaps, and putting some of the difference either in the stabilization fund or in OPEB to continue that commitment. So I recommend to this board what I believe to be a lean and responsible budget of $54,878,362. and myself, Julie, and Bob are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
I want to thank you for this presentation. I think this has been the best presentation since I've been on the Board of Selectmen. You did a great job with that, really explaining the strong financial picture for the town of Lynnfield. I want to thank Bob Curtin, who certainly had a hand in this over the last couple of months until Mr. Dolan was able to get appointed as town administrator. And Julie, thank you also. I know you had a big hand in doing that, so thank you. Certainly this is a modest increase of 3.45%. I think we're doing a whole lot with this budget. It's very effective. I think we've tightened our belt this year, starting with the new growth leveling off over the last couple of years. At this point, I'd like to see if my board members have any questions or comments.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to echo your comments with respect to the excellent overview. The presentation was really 5-star. It was a great recap of the state of the town, so to say. But some comments that I'll make, and I hope people were listening closely to you, Rob, because there are some things that I think really should catch people's attention. I would suggest to this board and to the public that this budget in and of itself is fine, but doesn't bode well for the future. And I look at this and say, if you look back over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a marked trend of declining surpluses, and we're really just at break even in this particular budget. And Rob, you and I have talked about this in sidebar conversations. We can't have a school budget increasing at 4.5% or a town budget overall at 3.5% or whatever, because our revenue growth isn't keeping pace with our expenses. So, I think that, well, again, this budget does it for this year. We have to look, down the road here, and I think do a lot more long-range planning with respect to how we're going to approach some of these issues. For example, the stabilization fund, we reduced funding to that, and it's on the low end. And that disturbs me, because I think during these good times, that's when the stabilization contributions should be such that we're really providing for, as you referred to, what we all see is the downturn that will come eventually. When it comes, we don't know, but it will come, as history has shown us. Again, on the capital facility side, we're on the high end, and that's fine. We call it a modest budget, but on the other hand, it's not modest if we're looking at state aid that doesn't keep track with what's happening on the local scene. And we're a disadvantaged community in the sense that we don't get the advantage of state aid that other communities do. So when state aid increases by 1.25%, and we're increasing 2 points more than that, the math just doesn't add up. And at some point, with the pressures from increased pension cost, from health cost, and those are not controllables on our part. We have to deal with them. So, I think that, again, I'm satisfied with this budget overall, where it's at, but I think in this coming year, we're gonna have to spend a lot of time and effort in really getting ahead of the curve, because I think that, if we come in with expenses, which we know, looking ahead to next year's will be up at least, 3%. And if we're not realizing any new growth and in dealing with these other issues of increased costs that we don't have control over, we could be looking at an override. And if it's not next year, it's the year after. So, I'm concerned, and I just want to express that to people, so that, fine, we get by this budget year, but the future is going to take some, I think, real, managing on the part of the Board of Selectmen, the department heads in the school department, and the school committee.
Yeah, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, I think you did a great job with this. Appreciate it. And I do want to echo a lot of the comments that Selectman Dalton had, to the point where I think, even though we're trying to recognize the OPEB liability and put some money in there, I certainly wouldn't want to reduce the amount we're still putting in that stabilization fund. I think we should keep that at $200,000, maybe we reduce that OPEB contribution to 200, so we keep that going in there. I understand the capital facilities stabilization fund is getting up towards its higher limit, but you know, we've been riding the wave of the benefit of Market Street, and we've been able to build those funds back up. And if you look in 2012, 2013, those are pretty much used up, and that's what they're there for. And that's why we've been aggressively putting money back in there, and I think we should continue that trend as long as we can. As far as the residents, you know, again, if they're really paying attention to the numbers we're talking about tonight, the 2.5 increase we can do under our levy every year just covers the increase in our education costs. And everyone's got to realize that we're very much dependent on state aid and new growth and local receipts. So, you know, that's why it's important that we look at those every year and project out what's going to happen the next couple of years. We do have some projects coming on in town that we might want to consider, and we have projects that are already online. You know, Rob, do we have an idea right now what we're looking at on Route 1? We have a project there that's at the cost property that's going to be built, but do we have an idea of what that size of that property is going to be dollar-wise, and when we think that might be online? Because if we're not going to be able to tax it in the next 2 years, we're talking 3 years down the road before it benefits the town.
We have done, I do not have information regarding the amount of money you brought in, but I can have the assessors get that information tomorrow. But they are shoveling the ground.
Yeah.
And they are building. Usually with the new building, you look at it, you know, a 14 to 16 month ramp up. That's our newest hope for new growth. And obviously at town meeting, there's some important decisions to be made regarding some other opportunities.
Right. So we have this July, then the following July, possibly July of 19. We can start taxing that piece of property, and then seeing some growth in it in the following year. But other than that, it's you got Market Street, you got the new building over here. They've got the frame up, and then you got just homeowners. So we do have to look at getting through the next 2 years most likely with limited new growth. And you know, and possibly looking back at our collective bargaining agreements and see if we can get some relief there, because it's if you're looking at 3 to 3.5% every year just to start the conversation, so that's not sustainable, and so we do have to take a look at that.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on Phil's comments, I would echo and support his idea of reducing OPEB by $100,000. I think that's something that would certainly make me feel a lot more comfortable that money going to the stabilization. And then I think just in the last part of your conversation, Phil, again, agreeing with you that, you know, looking at these projects potentially coming on and the delay in time, that, you know, these next couple of years will be difficult. And even with those projects coming on, if we look back and if history teaches us anything in being fiscally responsible, Market Street was a great boom for us, and that's great. But after a while, that new growth goes away, all right? And you saw it from Rob's charts and so forth that, you know, even with if the town has some new development, that's a shot in the arm for, you know, several years. And I think we have to look, you know, beyond these 2 and 3 year periods as to how we're going to manage this town.
No, I think I just want to follow that up. Certainly, we were able to make ends meet this year, but I do agree. I think certainly the discussion we had with the school committee and the superintendent, it was very difficult for them to get at that 4.5% number. I know they had to make some cuts to some pretty important positions, because I think they were looking at around 6.5% to fund the schools where they would want them to be. I certainly think that sort of help balance to get that the schools the number they needed, so reduce stabilization by 100,000 to meet the school's needs. Okay, and I think, Dick?
Just one final comment. So with respect to the schools and 4.5%, you know, in the private sector, if your revenues aren't growing, you just find ways to work around it. And I think that, you know, this coming year, the charge to all departments and including the schools, you know, has to be something less than what they had this year.
Okay, do we have, Mr. Dolan, if you want to speak just to the point about, I know certainly you made a recommendation on stabilization, your thoughts on switching the 100,000? from that, from
Yeah.
OPEB?
Yeah, obviously, the will of the Board of Selectmen, and I don't think it would make a major issue in terms of where we stand with OPEB, with the rating agencies. And if the board felt that 100,000 is better in stabilization fund, I would support it entirely.
Julie, just quickly, your thoughts on the rating agency? I know certainly they look at that OPEB number, but they certainly look at stabilization too. So what's your comments?
They certainly look at our financial policies and where we are at in the percentage, and we're, at the low end of the stabilization. So I think it would be beneficial to put that 100,000 in that fund. They recognize that there's a lot of things we need to fund before OPEB. So I would say stabilization would be a priority over the OPEB.
To have a motion from one of my fellow board members to make that switch on the proposed budget. We need a motion, correct, on that?
I'll move that the budget presented to us be amended by reducing the OPEB contribution from $300,000 to $200,000, and that the contribution to the stabilization fund be increased by $100,000.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I think, the OPEB, we were looking at it was about $250,000 every year, Julie, right? That we had an OPEB, 200,000 to about $250,000?
It was 3,018, and prior to that, it was 200,000.
Yeah, so it's about comfortable where we were in years prior. Okay.
And the liability is so large that as long as we're making an effort, I think the amount is almost irrelevant.
Thank you. Do you have any more comments, questions regarding the budget?
Not for me.
No, I think we've done a nice job in, if you look at what we have at the end of the day, the surplus, we've cut down to next to nothing, so we've gotten every penny out of this budget, and I appreciate all the work everyone's done on it.
I would agree. All right, thank you. Job well done. Really appreciated the presentation. We're going to move on to the review of the proposed warrant articles. The annual town warrant has been prepared for the town administrator by the town administrator's office and reviewed by town council. We're going to be making recommendations to this town warrant at our April 10th meeting. What action do we need tonight, Bob, on this?
Generally, we go through the warrant articles quickly just for the benefit of the public, and then we will ask that the board move to close the warrant with the articles as presented. And Mr. Dolan's asked me, because of my long experience in coming to town meeting, to quickly go through the warrant articles. If that's the wish of the board, I'll make this
Gentlemen?
quick and painless.
Yep, go right ahead.
The first articles tend to be what we call the perennial articles that you see. Article 1, act on the reports of town officers and committees. That's essentially approving the town report. Number 2, we choose the ceremonial offices of field drivers, pound keeper, and wood measurers. 3 is fixing the compensation of the elective officers. As you know, the only boards that are paid are the selectmen and the assessors. 4 is any changes we are making to the current fiscal year budget because of areas where we've had higher spending or lower spending. Our office and we'll be working with the departments and especially Julie McCarthy to get those prepared for you in time to make a recommendation. The 5th one is money for bills overdue from a prior fiscal year. Sometimes we get bills late, sometimes they're sent to the wrong department, and so we'll have a few of those, I believe, for this town meeting. Article 6, we need to appropriate some funds for this fiscal year to fund overtime in the dispatcher's contract because for past fiscal years, because there was a misapplication of one of the clauses of that contract brought to our attention by the dispatchers. It's not a lot of money. It only affects certain overtime differentials, so we will be bringing that forward. Article 7 is the town budget, operating budget. Article 8 is the capital budget. Article 9 is the appropriation to the stabilization fund. 10 is the capital facilities fund. OPEB is funded within the operating budget, so the vote you make tonight will amend the operating budget as presented. 11, there's a new approach to the revolving funds this year because of legislation adopted at the state level. And this allows us to amend our bylaws to authorize the revolving funds that we have had. Tom Mullen worked on the language here with Julie McCarthy. And you'll see that it basically just, if you go through, we have the table of the existing revolving funds. The next article, Article 12, sets the maximum expenditure in this fiscal year coming for those revolving funds. Those are funds for the public that we take in funds, usually for user fees, etc., and then we expend them without requiring additional appropriation at town meeting. Things like flu shots, council on aging and recreation trips, work on the fields where we take in money from user groups, and users of the Merit Center. Articles 13 and 14 are our EMS and golf enterprise budgets, where the money we take in for those services are used to fund the cost of the services. Article 15, we have an article with money for the design, construction, furnishing, equipping clubhouse at the King Rail Golf Course. As you know, we've had several iterations of that project where the board has worked to reduce costs, which have been extensive because of environmental conditions there, to reduce the project so we can have a modest clubhouse there that is within our spending program. 16 and on, we're dealing with zoning matters. When we did the recodification of the zoning bylaw, it kind of cross-paths with our changes when we were dealing with the marijuana establishments. As you know, the town voted to ban recreational marijuana use within the town. And those changes were approved but not captured in the recodification of our zoning bylaw. So this, these next two articles, in effect, puts those back in. The first is a permanent ban, and the second is a temporary moratorium, which will assist us while the permanent ban is being reviewed by the Attorney General. In case the Attorney General strikes down a permanent ban for some technical reason, our temporary moratorium will still be in place. Article 18 is something sent to us by the Planning Board, which would update our zoning map. And this doesn't change any zoning, but it just updates the map to reflect the existing past votes and the existing zoning in all those zones, including the overlay zones. Now, the next articles were submitted by petition. Articles 19, 20, and 21 were submitted and affect the property, the Sagamore Golf Course property. The first article would rezone that property for elderly housing use, as the board has seen the proposal by the developer. Article 20 would allow a private commercial golf course as a allowed use as a matter of right within the elderly housing zone, because the plan at Sagamore is to intersperse the new housing units among the first 9 holes of the golf course. And Article 21 would amend the housing for the elderly zone to increase the number of allowed units to 154, which is the amount of units proposed for that development. I believe the current number is 135 or thereabouts, so it's a small increase. And Article 22 is our final article, and this, again, was submitted by petition, and this represents the Willsbrook housing proposal that the board has heard. This would rezone the land for that development from residential to an elderly housing district. And that's the warrant.
Any questions from my board members?
If I might, with respect to Article 15, which we had some conversation about this morning, Bob and Rob, I guess I'm still a little bit hesitant with the language that's there. And if I was a member of the public reading Article 15 as it stands now before we go to town meeting, I would think that we're looking for authorization for an amount of money that would complete the clubhouse, and that's something from our conversation this morning that's not really the intent of that. As I understand it, the intent is to authorize payment of fees due the architect to this point. So I just, I don't know how my two colleagues are reacting to the language in this, but I think it's troubling to me.
No, Dick, I would agree with you on that, because I read that, and that was my first thought when I saw that as one of the articles. Rob, if you just provide some quick input on, or comment on that Article 15.
Sure, the money is to, the dollars are to pay an outstanding bill to the architect for work already completed. So that would have to be changed.
So Rob, if that's the case, why wouldn't we then say that it's monies due for architectural fees relative to the work done to this point, and actually put in an amount, since if it's past due, that we must have invoices that allow us to put that amount right into the warrant article, and not, one of you two, if you can just comment on that?
Generally, we don't put the appropriation amount in the article, but in the motion itself throughout the articles, except for where we set the maximum expenditure for the revolving funds. There's no money mentioned. That way we have the flexibility if there was a minor adjustment in the billing or something, that we can make it as part of the motion. The article on the clubhouse was drafted in the broadest sense. That way it didn't limit what the board was going to do. But if the board wanted to circumscribe the article, you could do that either by changing the wording of the article, or you could just make it clear that your intent is only to go forward and pay the architect bills. That could be done by changing the article, or just by having a motion that addressed that.
My preference, and I'd like to hear from my colleagues, would be to change the article so that it's clear to the public, even before the motion is made, as to what the intent of the board is.
No, I would agree with Dick on that. We certainly can have that as a placeholder and ask Tom Mullen for his feedback on that, and because I can do the language tonight. Correct?
Mr. Chairman, may
Phil?
Yeah, the way it reads now, it sounds as if we are looking for the funding to build the clubhouse and maintenance building.
I agree.
And that may have been a placeholder intent of it, but if we're only looking to pay the bills that are associated with the architectural work that's been done, can't that be incorporated in one of the earlier articles that is for paying bills?
Past due, right?
The past due bills of the town? And we can get rid of Article 15 altogether?
I suppose, and I defer to Julie on this, one thing we could do is add it to the selectmen's, a similar amount to the selectmen's engineering and.
We did it separate because the funding source was gonna be the sale of real estate fund.
Right.
So it's where it's coming out of, it makes a difference, even though, we couldn't incorporate it with
No.
one of the first articles? Okay.
I think it should be separated out because we're using a different funding source than,
Okay.
like an operating fund, we would use free cash.
Then we should reword it to state exactly what we're trying to do with
So
those
we
funds.
it's a placeholder, we can certainly look into that, right?
I'll check with our town council whether we need a special meeting to approve the warrant as amended.
Well, couldn't we do a conditional approval, conditioned upon, town council providing the language to reflect the will of the board?
Mhm.
I
Yeah, because it doesn't read as if we're just paying that.
I mean, I think generally, we know what we're, willing to approve, and it's language that specifically talks to the payment of an outstanding invoice.
We could change the language and run it by town council.
Yeah, I think that's what we should do. Amend Article 15.
I'd ask the chair, does that require a motion?
I would think it would, right? Absolutely, yeah. You could have a motion, proposed motion on that?
I happen to have a motion on that. I'll move that the Article 15 be amended to read, in effect, that the purpose of this article is to pay for architectural fees for services rendered to this point relative to the King Rail Reserve Golf Course project.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The only other comment I have, Mr. Chairman, is I think the Sagamore Golf Course, those three articles for the Sagamore Golf Course should go at the end of the agenda in the warrant, because I think there's going to be a lot of people in the room specifically for those three items. And I think in order to get all our business done, we should put the three of those at the end of the night.
I think we have all of Sagamore at the end, all of the vicinity of that development.
Right.
I mean, my concern with the Sagamore piece is that Sagamore Golf Course is certainly going to be a major burden on the town of Lynnfield if that's not passed for the school system. We certainly talked about a budget of 4.5% that they have right now. Concern I have is if people leave, because those are three warrant articles, I think we have to move through those. I'm confident that the town of Lynnfield and town meeting will stay for all four. I mean, it's the same issue, pretty much.
Well, it's a different issue. I think most people are going to be coming for that one article. It doesn't matter what's after it. I think whatever's after it's going to suffer. I just don't want to see everybody leave. We've seen that happen in the past, and you lose your quorum, and that defeats the purpose of the rest of the articles. So
I think if the same people that come out to certainly vote, say in support of Lynnfield Public Schools, if that one does fail and they end up building, I think it's how many homes, residential homes was it, Bob? Rob?
156.
Well, I think the one across the street is, I think it was 15 to 20.
I think it's 66.
66.
66 on the 66. So that's,
66.
so I think the same group
units.
of people who are going to come out to protect Lynnfield Public Schools is going to remain for that one article.
I hope so. And
I
we should certainly encourage everybody to stay.
Yeah.
If we're going to leave it that way.
So I'm comfortable with the placement. Any other comments?
No, good job.
Thank you. We're going to move on to, I just wanted to speak, I didn't speak, the Library Building Committee chose to remove their article, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's why we didn't speak to that, agenda item number 8. I'm going to move on to closing of the annual town meeting warrant. Do I have a proposed motion on that?
I'll move that the board vote to close the annual town meeting warrant as presented and amended, I would say, yes.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Number 12, on the renewal of the seasonal liquor licenses. We have those prepared for our review. I don't have any comments or questions. We'll go right to the motion.
I'll move the board vote to approve the seasonal wine and malt licenses for Sagamore Golf Inc. and Town of Lynnfield as presented, provided that all local and state fees and insurance requirements are met.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to move on to number 13, appointment to the War Memorial Committee. I think it was last meeting. Jason Kimball, had resigned his position on this committee because he had no longer lived in Lynnfield. He has, I think, passed papers on a home. When he heard that we had great concern that he no longer was a Lynnfield pioneer, he quickly moved back to the town of Lynnfield with great concern since he broke his long-standing tenure as a Lynnfield pioneer. So he is currently, I think, in Wakefield trying to get back here to Lynnfield. So we have a proposed motion on that.
I think we should build a wall around Lynnfield so that Jason can't be allowed.
I would
back in.
consider that motion.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the board appoint Jason Kimball to the War Memorial Committee effective April 10th, 2018, or upon his establishment of residence in Lynnfield, whichever comes later.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
14, resignation from the Recreational Path Committee. Resident Sheila Aronson has offered her resignation. She's worked hard on that Recreational Path Committee. I thank her for her service. That committee has worked hard of late. I know I spoke with Chairman Numi. She's going to be a big loss for that committee. But I do a motion to accept her resignation.
I'll move the board accept with regret the resignation of Sheila Aronson from the Recreational Path Committee.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're going to move on to number 15, the exemption from Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 268A, Section 20B, from Finance Committee member Robert Priestley, who owns the Priestley's Photography Company. They're going to provide photography and music services for this weekend's father-daughter dance. He does a great job. It's a great event. Do I have a proposed motion on that?
I'll move the board approve the proposed exemption under Chapter 268A, Section 20B, as requested by the Recreation Commission and Finance Committee member Robert Priestley for the provision of services at the father-daughter dance.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We move on to Selectmen update. I'll start off with mine, Senior Citizen Advisory Council. I don't have an update right now. I know Chris Gogan, the chairman, is looking for a time to come before the Board of Selectmen to provide an update on the great work the Senior Citizen Advisory Council is doing. So I'll defer to him to give us the next update. A Healthy Lynnfield, Selectman Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had Chris Herron come and speak at the schools on the 12th. It was very well attended. I think that was a great first speaker that comes in after we've really gotten our coalition going. And we had about 200 residents come and listen to Chris's story. He's very poignant speaker, and he tells a compelling story about his battle with addiction and how he was a professional basketball player, and the addiction ruined his career, and how he's battled 14 years to get over it, and now he does a national speaking circuit that he tells his story to not only the kids of the middle school and high school ages, but also the parents of the towns to get people involved in their children's activities, and also talks about what telltales and warning signs that parents should be looking out for and really be involved with the kids. We also have another speaker coming on in April on the 11th. We have Jeff Allison, who is a Peabody resident, who was a professional baseball player, and he ran into the same type of problem as a young professional, and he's also going to come in and talk to the high school students about his ordeal with drug addiction and how he's overcome it. And I think that'll be the second thing second speaker we brought in. And the other thing we got coming up is on May 12th, the day before Mother's Day, we got the Lynnfield Day and the Geranium Fest, and the A Healthy Lynnfield will be on site with a table there to talk to people and give out our information and be part of that Lynnfield Day on the middle school grounds. So that's what we got.
Thank you, Phil. Recreational Path Committee, Selectman Dalton.
I think the most important thing to say with respect to that committee is that on the 27th of March, that's Tuesday evening, at I believe 6:30 at the Lynnfield Middle School, there'll be a community workshop, at which time the design issues will be addressed by World Tech Engineering and the committee. I would encourage residents who are interested in the rail trail to attend this meeting to get a better understanding of some of the design features. Sometime following that meeting, I would imagine hopefully within 30 days thereafter, There'll be a meeting that will be conducted by the Department of Transportation, which is mandatory when a project gets to its 25% completion status. And that'll be another community setting for people to learn more about this particular project.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Town Administrator update and goals. Mr. Dolan, regarding our goals and our project list that we've implemented for the Board of Selectmen. Any updates?
Sure, yeah, I would just, if it's acceptable, just point out some of the items in which we have made progress. Obviously, first is Department Head FY 19 goals. We put a targeted completion date of the beginning of the fiscal year. Again, I have spoken with department heads in which 3 goals are to be submitted by the 1st of May. Also, in speaking with Selectman Dalton today, by the next meeting, I'd like to have some more formalized dates and times and topics for department head quarterly reports, so this board can expect them. The number of times certain department heads might vary depending on what they have to offer. But we want to break it up in terms of not only budget discussions in terms of where they are, but interesting topics that would inform the Board of Selectmen as well as the community as a whole. Also, we would like to, we've made great progress, I think, in the community compact. We are in the 9th inning with 2 outs of the process in which the town of Wakefield and the town of Lynnfield has looked at a number of companies to upgrade our mapping system, which is a regional effort that will certainly help our fire department, our health department, our building department. We are just about there to make a recommendation. So that has been a lengthy process, and Charlie's done a great job with that. He's kind of led the multi-disciplined group. Secondly, I have begun review for FY 20 opportunities. We have about 15 to 20 opportunities that might be of interest to the Board of Selectmen to pursue. But I would also, before I come before the Board of Selectmen, make it a department head meeting to talk about these proposals and maybe get certainly get the input of each department heads to rank them to get a broader perspective of what they think are the areas that we should concentrate on, and then share that feedback with the Board of Selectmen when we make our recommendations for the next community compact that we're going to do. I'd like to thank Bob Curtin not only for the great job he did as interim town manager and to help us with this, help me with this budget and learn about all aspects of town meeting, since obviously I come from a place that did not have town meeting, but his efforts in the last 2 storms, which in many cases were scary and a lot of damage. Bob kept the public aware consistently using social media, and I want to thank him for that. We have a challenge, I think, in IT. Julie can speak to that, and I think one of the challenges this year is for us to try to figure out where we want to go in terms of information technology. Due to the storm, we're supposed to be last Friday, but we're meeting with Wakefield this Friday to talk about some regionalization opportunities to perhaps at some point present to the board in the creation of a technology plan. That may mean some temporary support. That may mean looking at an outside consultant to come in. That may mean the formation of a technology committee. Wakefield has invested and is looking for a partner in social media expansion that we want to hear. Bob and I met with them once. We've asked them to come to us with a social media plan specific to Lynnfield. They're looking to regionalize in that effort. And we've rescheduled from the meeting for this Friday from the previous. The Recreational Path Committee, I was supposed to attend the meeting last week. I was unable, but I do plan on attending the March 27th community workshop. And I was supposed to attend the meeting on the 10th, however, the Board of Selectmen, so I'll work with Jerry for another date, but I look forward to the 27th to learn a little bit more about the Recreation Path Committee. We had a meeting with a resident from areas that are impacted by flooding. And although not in the capital budget, I have begun to work with Charlie to look at beginning to look at a comprehensive program to not deal with one specific problem, but a look at in totality, the town's issues in regarding drainage that include the Wood Roads, Ledge, Canterbury, Hawksbrook, including the bridge on Main Street on the Wakefield border, to look at potentially a comprehensive package to deal with some of these issues that are serious and real, but the costs of them are extraordinary, and we may perhaps need to look at a different approach to funding that has been done in the past. I'm working also with Julie on that. Charlie has some great ideas also on that. I think there'll be progress made. The Capital Facilities Advisory Committee, we began to talk about with several individuals, myself personally, including members of the Board of Selectmen, the creation of some sort of implementation committee as suggested by the chairman, and I look forward to further conversations. I think some real progress has been made in terms of where the direction that we can, the options that we can take moving forward. I spent a large portion of my Thursday with Mr. Arthur Bork, who has done honestly incredible. Talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of free project management. He took me to basically every park in the city and gave me the history of what it looked like 30 years ago and what it looks like today. And that also came with lunch. And we began work to finish the track in the areas, but the snowstorm has set us back on that. But that was very valuable, and there's continued discussion on some of the items that have still remained. Those items include options at Jordan Park, as well as the sites of the Huckleberry School and the Summer Street School that are still on the list of waiting to move forward. Senior citizen tax relief. I had a very long discussion with the Reading town assessor, who was Reading and Wakefield, that he used to work for me in a previous life, about more specifically what Reading did. And also, it's not on here, but today I met with Arthur. The Boston Globe did a very interesting story, and I spoke with Selectman Dalton about the tax deferment program that is offered to cities and towns, and what we can do to that particular program to make it more user-friendly. I believe the number is 7. There are 7 individuals currently using it in Lynnfield, and it is a viable option for senior citizens that perhaps we can do a presentation with the senior citizen committee. Obviously, the school space and enrollment committee was formed and began with interviews today. And finally, I think a good idea is to separate the Upper Main Street developments, since they're now each developing a life of their own. But I want to report that the development teams for both projects made complete presentations to department heads that resulted in excellent questions. Some of the people involved in Lynnfield for a number of years said this has never been done before, but I believe that each department head needs to have a working knowledge of everything that's going on in this community, and certainly has something to add. And I think some of the projects were improved due to that hour of time spent. So that's what I have right now. Thank you.
Rob, just quickly, I know you had met on school safety regarding a product for the doors.
Yes.
I was just wondering if there's any update on that?
Yes.
Follow up?
Yep, we have 2 options that are before us right now. We have had a lengthy conversation with a company that is using what they refer to as the Sandy Hook door in Connecticut. It's an expensive investment, but it's a user-friendly model of a one-lock door. It's used by teachers. They gave us a few locks to install to test them out. Obviously, now that we work with our current locksmith, we can replicate that with our own doors. But the safety committee will be meeting when Dave comes back. We've narrowed it down to 2 options. And we also are having meetings. I'll be meeting with the state fire marshal to talk about, and I think this maybe is an issue for the MMA, that the Commonwealth needs to look at some of their regulations
Yeah.
regarding what is allowed and not allowed in light of the current situation across this country. And we have installed a few devices that installed in other communities that should be allowed, but the regulations are from 1970 or 1980 or 1990 that don't reflect the fact that the buildings in Lynnfield are sprinklered and safe, and there needs to be some flexibility for communities to deal with safety issues at the local level. And he's opened that discussion, and also the town of Westwood has contacted me, and they're interested in pursuing this at the MMA level to advocate. Things have got to change. People need to be safe, but there needs to be pragmatism and reasonableness as it pertains to some options that are cost efficient, because some of these options, if I may add, are so expensive that the majority of communities in the Commonwealth have no hope of ever providing additional safety. Now, is that the goal? I think.
Now, is that Sandy Hook one of those options that are so expensive?
Well, it is. It's right now the Sandy Hook door for across the entire school district is upwards of $150,000. That's for every door in Lynnfield Public Schools. That could be cut down. That's 300 doors. Now, these prices are still being negotiated, right? It's an excellent product. It's in play. Julie has budgeted some money that we have left over, so we can make it possibly phase it in over 2 years, and there can be some reasonableness on what some of the equipment that's there before, so no one feels unprotected. But they just can't say no. They just can't say it's not allowed. It has to be.
Yeah, well, I certainly know they have a challenge.
There's frustration.
We support the school committee and the superintendent. I know there's a challenge in budget, but I know school safety, as the superintendent said, is the primary concern of the community. I think the board would agree. We also agree to that. And certainly I think I'm happy you're pursuing that. I don't want the budget restraints to in any way hinder that progress.
Yeah, we can add that for the.
If you could add that, certainly as an update. So I appreciate that, because I know certainly the safety issue that is for the schools, so thank you for that.
So Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, so I'd say two things. Number one, I wouldn't support a phase-in. I would think that we should be moving towards a resolution as quickly as we can to find what the best system is to protect our children, and then to, as much as we've all talked about the difficult budget, I don't understand why we wouldn't be working towards this being part of the April town meeting.
I would certainly support that, because when I heard that, I thought it'd be a higher number. I think 150,000 certainly is a high number, but safety is a primary concern we have as a community. And I've seen those locks, and it's pretty impressive what they do. It's within a split second that those doors lock. I think it's well worth looking at for town meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we should take a look at it. We can certainly somehow find a way to work it into our capital budget.
Yeah.
And then we could if that type of product can be brought forward in time to get on that warrant. So.
Sure, we're working very hard. We just want to make sure, because all these products are very new, and a lot of people have not purchased them yet. We would probably be the first or second in the Commonwealth ever to purchase them, that they're quality and they're the best product. We wanted to do it over the last week, but obviously the storms messed us up a little bit. But we'll get it done as quickly as we
I
possibly
think
can.
that the challenges teachers have with these doors is the way they lock. It could be several seconds, and several seconds could mean certainly a whole lot. And from what I've seen, what you've shared with me, it's pretty impressive. I think it's well worth the investment.
Right, but again, I guess I would say that, we should do the due diligence on the product itself, the various products, but we can still make a reasonable estimate as to a budget amount, so that we're covered for that for the fiscal year. And then secondly, just a comment, and have the greatest respect for the MMA, and they go to bat for the cities and towns constantly with the legislature and the administration, but that's a long-term typically that's a long-term resolution to something, and it would probably take legislation, whatever, and we know that drill, so that's not going to be something that's going to make sure that children are as safe as they can be.
We'll have something at town meeting.
And I just want to quickly also say we've been working with the school committee on this. They've been certainly strong partners with us on school safety, and the superintendent So this is something I appreciate they're partnering with us on this.
Yeah.
So if you just let them know that we're willing to move forward with that, we'll put that at the top of our list. Thank you, Rob, for that excellent update. I'm going to move on to.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more comment.
Go right
I'm
ahead.
very comment-oriented tonight. I'd just like to say, it really compliments to Rob and Bob. The task list, when the three of us voted to enact this, document to be part of our operations here, the idea was to hold ourselves accountable, the town administrator accountable, and for once, we have it, I think, being addressed as it was intended to. So with a complete, and current update on all, the major issues that are before the town. So my compliments to Rob and Bob for finally getting this headed in the right direction.
We'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, as always, to bring matters before the Board of Selectmen that are not on the official agenda. Anybody in the audience have any comments? Hearing and seeing none. We're going to move on to item number 19, use of town facilities. This was a wonderful event last year, Festival of Colors. It was at Glen Meadow Park. I'm hoping to attend. I wasn't able to attend last year, but from the pictures I saw, it was a great event. Do I have a motion on that? Festival of Colors at Glen Meadow.
April 7th.
Oh, okay. I'll move that the board approve the use of Glen Meadow Park on April 7th, 2018 by the Lynnfield Indian Association for the annual Festival of Colors.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 20, request for executive session to discuss the purchase, exchange, and lease or value of real property, specifically the Sagamore Golf Course and the Willsbrook properties at Main Street.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board enter into executive session to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, specifically the Sagamore Golf Course and the Willsbrook properties.
I'll second that.
And just before all those in favor, an open meeting, this may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town, so that's why we need to go into executive session.
Roll call.
Roll call.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the board does not plan to re-enter open session. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good night.